Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I've always been a sucker for a good scare, so I figured I'd share a story of my own. This one's about a Tinder date that went wrong, and to this day, it still gives me the creeps. This is the story of how I ended up on a date with a psychopath. It all started when I matched with a guy named Josh. He had a great smile, and his profile seemed witty and charming. We chatted for a few days, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He seemed too good to be true, but I was excited to finally meet him. So we decided to meet up at a cozy little coffee shop in the heart of the city. I arrived early and grabbed a table by the window. As I waited for him, I couldn't help but feel nervous. I was eager to find out if our online chemistry would translate into real life. As soon as he walked in, I knew it was him. He looked even better in person, and my heart skipped a beat. As he approached, he gave me a smile that made me weak in the knees. We spent hours talking about our lives, our interests, and what we were looking for in a relationship. Time seemed to fly by, and before I knew it, the sun had set and the coffee shop was closing. Neither of us wanted the night to end, so Josh suggested we take a walk in the nearby park. As we strolled along the dimly lit pathways, he told me more about his job as a real estate agent and how he sometimes had access to these beautiful but abandoned old houses. That's when he asked if I'd like to see one of the properties he was working on. He assured me it was close by and that I'd be amazed by his beauty. I hesitated at first, but the allure of exploring an old, forgotten house was too strong. I agreed, and we hopped in his car and drove to the property. The house was hidden behind overgrown trees and bushes, giving it a foreboding appearance. As we walked up to the front door, the wind picked up, and I could hear the branches scratching against the house like bony fingers. Josh unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. He pulled out a flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness, revealing a once grand entryway with a grand staircase, now covered in dust and cobwebs. As we explored the house, I kept hearing strange noises, like footsteps and whispers, but Josh brushed it off, saying it was just the wind or the house settling. I tried to convince myself that he was right, but in a place like this, I couldn't really trust that easily. We eventually found ourselves in the basement, which was far colder than the rest of the house. The air felt heavy, and it was hard to breathe. The beam of the flashlight caught something in the corner, a rusted old wheelchair. It seemed so out of place, and I couldn't help but wonder who it had belonged to. Josh must have sensed my discomfort because he suggested we head back upstairs. As we climbed the stairs, I heard a loud crash from the basement. My heart raced, but I didn't dare look back. Once we reached the top, I could see the fear in Josh's eyes as well. As we stood there, I noticed that Josh seemed to be changing right in front of me. His charming demeanor faded away, and he became increasingly aggressive. His grip on my arm tightened, and his voice grew louder and more demanding. I started to panic, desperately searching for a way out. In a sudden burst of courage, I managed to break free from his grip and ran through the dimly lit hallways. I could hear Josh's heavy footsteps following closely behind me. My heart raced as I frantically searched for a hiding place, hoping to buy myself some time to think of an escape plan. I stumbled upon a small storage room, cluttered with old furniture and dusty boxes. I quickly ducked behind an ancient armoire, barely managing to stifle a cry as I knocked over a stack of musty books. I held my breath, praying that Josh hadn't heard the noise. Moments later, I heard the door creak open and Josh's footsteps entered the room. He began calling my name, his voice dripping with menace. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to become invisible as his footsteps grew closer and closer. Just when I thought he would discover me, I heard a loud crash from elsewhere in the house. Startled, Josh rushed out of the room to investigate the noise. Seizing the opportunity, I quietly slipped out from my hiding place and tiptoed down the hallway, searching for an exit. As I rounded a corner, I found a large window that seemed to lead out to the overgrown backyard. Desperate, I tried to pry it open, but years of neglect had left it rusted shut. I glanced around, searching for something to help me break the window, and my eyes fell upon a heavy iron poker from a nearby fireplace. With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the poker at the window, shattering the glass and sending shards flying. I quickly climbed through the jagged opening, cutting my hands and legs in the process, but the pain barely registered in my panic-stricken state. Bloodied and bruised, I sprinted through the overgrown yard, desperate to put as much distance between myself and Josh as possible. I could still hear him cursing and shouting in the distance as I made my way back to the main road. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver, a kind of older woman, took me to the nearest police station. As I recounted the terrifying events to the officers, I couldn't help but feel grateful that I had managed to escape. The police later informed me that Josh had a history of violence against women and had been using Tinder to lure victims to isolated locations. They arrested him, and he's now serving a lengthy prison sentence. This harrowing experience has left me shaken and distrustful of meeting people online. I've learned that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, wearing a smile that could charm even the most cautious of hearts. My story begins during a time when I was single and eager to find a connection in this fast-paced world. I never expected that swiping right on Tinder would lead me down a dark path. This is the story of how a seemingly perfect Tinder date turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. After matching with a beautiful girl named Sarah, we spent a few days exchanging messages about our hobbies, jobs, and favorite movies. She was funny, intelligent, and stunning. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I was excited to finally meet her in person. We decided to meet at a trendy downtown bar known for its craft cocktails and calm atmosphere. On the day of the date, I arrived early, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. I found a table near the back of the bar and nervously fidgeted with my drink, occasionally glancing up to scan the crowd for Sarah's arrival. When she finally walked in, I was awestruck. She was even more gorgeous than her pictures, and my heart raced as she approached the table. I know it's a cliche, but she was. Her smile was captivating, and she greeted me with a warm hug before sitting down. We spent the next hour getting to know each other better. Sarah's laughter was infectious, and her stories were fascinating. I felt an instant connection, and I couldn't believe my luck in finding such an amazing woman. As the night went on, the bar began to fill up, and the noise level rose. Sarah suggested that we order another round of drinks before finding a quieter spot to continue our conversation. I agreed and excused myself to the restroom while she ordered our beverages. When I returned, I found 2 fresh drinks waiting for us on the table. Sarah smiled sweetly and handed me mine, clinking her glass against mine in a toast to our first meeting. I took a sip and was pleasantly surprised by the unique flavor of the cocktail. As we continued to chat, I started to feel a little woozy. My vision blurred slightly and my head felt heavy. I brushed it off as the effects of the alcohol, but began to suspect something was off when I noticed that Sarah's eyes seemed to be darting around the room as if she was searching for something or someone. My heart raced as the realization hit me. Something was wrong with my drink. It had been spiked for sure. I could barely keep my head up, and my body felt like it was made of lead. Panic set in as I tried to maintain my composure and figure out what to do next. I racked my brain for a plan, my thoughts growing increasingly hazy. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. As I struggled to process what was happening, Sarah gently rubbed my arm, feigning concern. Her touch sent a shiver down my spine, the sinister nature of her actions becoming all too clear. Feeling cornered and increasingly weak, I mustered the strength to ask Sarah if we could step outside for some fresh air. To my surprise, she agreed without hesitation, her smile never faltering. She helped me to my feet, and we made our way to the exit, her grip on my arm alarmingly strong. As we stumbled outside, I desperately scanned the area for help. The once bustling street had become eerily quiet, with only a few people lingering near the entrance of the bar. I attempted to call out for assistance, but my voice was barely a whisper. Sarah guided me to a nearby bench, seemingly oblivious to my plight. I fought to stay conscious, but my eyelids grew heavier and heavier. The last thing I remember was Sarah's sweet smile as she whispered in my ear, "Sweet dreams." When I finally came to, it was hours later and I was still on the bench. The bar had closed, and the once bustling street was now deserted. As the fog in my head began to clear, I noticed that my watch was missing, along with my wallet. Feeling betrayed and disoriented, I dragged myself to my feet and stumbled to the nearest police station to report the incident. The officers listened intently as I recounted my harrowing experience. They informed me that this wasn't the first time they heard of such a crime, and that they suspected Sarah was part of a larger group of criminals who used dating apps to target unsuspecting victims. Over the following weeks, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. I felt violated, and the trust I had placed in Sarah shattered any confidence I had in meeting new people. I couldn't help but replay the events of that night in my head, wondering how I could have missed the signs that something was amiss. I became more withdrawn, avoiding social situations and deleting my Tinder account. The fear that I might fall victim to another cunning predator like Sarah consumed me, and my once active social life came to a grinding halt. As the investigation into Sarah and her accomplices continued, the police eventually apprehended several members of the group, but Sarah remained elusive. Knowing that she was still out there, preying on innocent people, haunted me. I couldn't forget the image of her sinister smile and the chilling words she whispered in my ear that night. Months later, as I slowly began to rebuild my life and trust in others, I received a call from the police. They had finally caught Sarah, and she was in custody. The relief I felt was indescribable, and I finally allowed myself to begin the healing process. The memory of that night still lingers, a chilling testament to the darker side of human nature that can hide behind even the most captivating smile. You wouldn't believe the time I had a Tinder date that went completely off the rails. I'm telling you, it was like something straight out of a twisted horror movie. I'm lucky to have escaped unharmed, but it left me questioning my trust in others in online dating altogether. So I matched with this guy, Jake, who seemed like a pretty cool dude. His profile had a bunch of pictures of him playing guitar, and he had a great sense of humor. We chatted for a while, and I felt like we really clicked. After a few days, we agreed to meet up for dinner at this cozy little Italian place. On the day of our date, I spent a little extra time getting ready, feeling both excited and nervous. As I walked into the restaurant, I spotted Jake sitting at a table near the back. He looked even better in person and greeted me with a warm smile. We hit it off right away, and the conversation flowed easily as we enjoyed our pasta and wine. But as the evening wore on, I started to notice a change in Jake's demeanor. He began asking increasingly invasive and bizarre questions, like if I had any deep, dark secrets or if I'd ever broken the law. I tried to steer the conversation back to more neutral topics, but Jake seemed fixated on digging into the darker aspects of my life. Eventually, he started talking about his latest business venture. He claimed he had a surefire way to make millions, but it involved some shady dealings that made me extremely uncomfortable. The more he spoke, the more I realized how off-putting and unsettling he was becoming. As the evening progressed, Jake finally dropped the bombshell. He needed money to kickstart his risky business idea and was looking for someone to invest. He asked if I would be interested in joining him, promising that the returns would be astronomical. By this point, I was thoroughly creeped out and knew that I needed to get out of there. I excused myself to use the restroom, but instead, I made a beeline for the exit. Once outside, I breathed a sigh of relief and quickly called a rideshare to take me home. As I sat in the back of the car, I couldn't help but replay the entire date in my head. Jake had seemed so charming and interesting at first, but his true nature had quickly revealed itself. I wondered how many other unsuspecting people he had tried to manipulate into funding his shady business. When I finally arrived home, I felt that I owed Jake an explanation, despite his unsettling behavior. I sent him a message saying that I had felt sick and needed to leave the date abruptly. I hoped that would be the end of it, but unfortunately, it was just the beginning. A few days later, I was shocked to find Jake standing at my doorstep. I hadn't shared my address with him, so his presence there sent shivers down my spine. I didn't open the door, but I could see him through the window, pacing back and forth with an agitated look on his face. Eventually, he left, leaving a note under the door that read, "We need to talk about our business partnership." Over the next few days, I received a barrage of messages from Jake, along with several hand-delivered letters. The contents of the letters were unnerving, with Jake detailing his plans for our future together and insisting that I was the perfect partner for his business venture. He even mentioned personal details that I had never shared with him, making it clear that he had been stalking me online and in real life. The stalking began subtly, almost as if Jake wanted me to be unaware of his presence. It started with random sightings. I would see him at the grocery store when I was shopping or notice him sitting in his car a few streets down from my house. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the frequency of these encounters made it clear that it was anything but. As the stalking escalated, I started to find small tokens left for me at my doorstep or on my car windshield. At first, it was just notes, filled with an unsettling mix of love confessions and business proposals. But then it began to take a darker turn. One day, I found a box with a dead bird inside, accompanied by a note that read, "This is what happens to those who fly away from me." Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, as I would often wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of tapping on my window or someone rattling the doorknob. I became increasingly paranoid, triple-checking the locks on my doors and windows and even installing a security system. Despite all my efforts, the feeling of being constantly watched and pursued was suffocating. I felt increasingly unsafe in my own home, and I knew I had to take action. I went to the police and filed a report, providing them with the letters and a detailed account of my interactions with Jake. They advised me to block his number and avoid any further contact with him. I followed their advice, but the situation continued to escalate. Late at night, I would hear someone lurking outside my home, and once I even found a bouquet of dead flowers left on my doorstep. The sense of dread and anxiety became overwhelming, and I made the difficult decision to move to a new apartment in a different part of town. After moving, I cut all ties with Jake and deleted my Tinder account, swearing off online dating for good. It took some time for me to feel safe again and trust my own instincts when meeting new people. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.